Patrick Samuels. Welcome to Security Halt, man. How's it going?
Good. How are you, brother?
Doing well. I love stumbling across other individuals from our background that are doing exciting and remarkable things in the entrepreneurial world. And when I saw you were also involved in regenerative farming, that's something that I like to show and talk about because it is vital and it's important. And it's something that many of us probably don't hear enough about and think that as an option when we get out. So today, man, like I want to dive into your story, not just how you became a Green Beret and your military travels and everything, but your background, how you found yourself in this chapter.
Sure. Yeah. Well, long stories for sure. But yeah, how I found myself, being a Green Beret is after high school, I went to West Point, kind of classic officer route, went to West Point. I graduated from West Point and was an infantry officer for a while, and then decided to, give it a shot and go to selection. Got picked up and made my way through the Q course, and then went over to 5th Group. And then did a few years over in 5th Group. And so, that's kind of the really short version of, how I became a Green Beret. And then kind of coming out of military service, we were kind of looking at a variety of different things. I had some interest in kind of starting a business, and we put together a small real estate investment firm. And, for me, that was kind of like a way to pay the bills, but it wasn't something that I was necessarily super passionate about or super excited about. And during COVID, we had actually started doing some research. I think everybody kind of started looking into like the food system and where does our food come from, and why are pharmaceutical companies like all of a sudden nobody can trust a pharmaceutical company, and then you can't trust a food company, and then it kind of leads you down the rabbit hole, And I think a lot of people started to kind of do their own research, and we were one of those people. And my wife had kind of always been into healthy living and kind of natural living and that kind of thing. I never really cared. I was like, give me a rip it and, some like ramen or whatever, and I'll be fine. But so we started to do a little bit of our own research and just really started to learn a lot about the food system. And that led us to want to just kind of do the homestead thing. And so kind of on our way out of the military, we bought a little homestead. We've got like 9 acres out here. And
where you at?
Kentucky, just north of Fort Campbell.
Nice. So you stay in the area.
Yeah. With our real estate investment company, we own a bunch of real estate down in Clarksville, and so we kind of stay local. And we've got a business down in Clarksville, so we stayed close. And then so we bought a little bit of land and started kind of just doing our own little homestead thing, and doing some meat chicken, some egg layers. We've got a few cattle out back, and started doing a little bit of the regenerative practices where we would multi-species grazing, and then rotating them around pasture, kind of controlling their movements, that sort of thing, trying to rebuild the soil a little bit. Because whenever we bought this place, the land was like completely bare. It was literally like bare earth. They had the guy previously had overpressured it a little bit, and so it was just bare when we bought it. And so we're trying to kind of bring it back to life a little bit here.
And did you have any foundational knowledge about farming, or did you just winging it like the Green Beret way?
That's I think that's just life sometimes, is like, this is kind of interesting. And then just, for me, I'm a just like dive head in kind of guy, and I kind of always have been. And I think most of us are. And on going out of the military, leaving the military, before I kind of started to do my own research and that kind of thing, I knew nothing about real estate and I knew nothing about farming. I grew up in Indiana where there's plenty of farming. And actually, whenever I was really, really young, my dad had worked on some farms and that kind of thing, but he probably stopped doing that when I was around like maybe 3. And so I never really had exposure to farming. And if I did, it was almost all like monocrop or like big feedlots for cattle or that kind of thing. It wasn't small scale. It wasn't regenerative. It wasn't working multiple species. And it certainly wasn't bringing any of those products to market either, which is its own challenge. It was kind of just like, hey, we're, this guy's a farmer for one of the big companies out there. And so, I knew nothing about farming. And so everything, I have I'm really close with like an Amish community up here by us down the road. And, those guys have been farming their entire lives, and so I tell them every day, for me, every day is an experiment on the farm, because it's like, it's something completely brand new, and they get a chuckle. I tell them all sorts of stories, when the cows get out of the fence or whatever it is, I tell them all sorts of stories, and they just crack up about all the problems I have trying to start a farm from scratch here. But
that's an interesting community to be next to.
Oh, it's fascinating. Yeah, they are. It's a pretty interesting community here because they're fairly progressive. And so they all have like cell phones. Their businesses have computers. They drive tractors. They're not allowed to drive cars, but they drive tractors. And so, yeah, it's a really progressive community. And so they've kind of opened themselves up to outsiders like me a little bit more. And then some of the families actually help us out with our nonprofit and some of the work that we do. And they've gotten kind of a little bit more plugged into the outside world. And then, I've been fortunate to kind of get plugged into their world too.
I see a lot of similarities with by, with, and through in this.
For sure. Yeah, that's what I've got. I'm in, classic. I'm in like a group chat of all former 18 alphas or whatever from across the regiment. And that's what I was telling them. As soon as I started like making relationships with these guys, I was like, I've already, whenever everything, when shit hits the fan, dude, I've already got my G-force ready to go. Like I've got food, I've got it all. I've got it all up there, man. They're the perfect G-force.
That is remarkable, man. Yeah. That's a testament of being able to build relationships with anybody and finding that common ground, dude. And who better to help you in this endeavor than somebody whose entire family lineage is being involved in land. And looking at the way that they do farming, is it completely opposite to the way that our American industrialized farming operations are?
Yeah. It's been. Well, I'll say it's a mix. Some of them, I would say, some of the Amish prefer the kind of older methods where it's a little bit more natural and that sort of thing. But then some of them have been probably co-opted by some of these big corporations. And you see that a little bit too, where, maybe they grew up doing something closer to regenerative agriculture, but then now that these big corporations came in and provide them a contract, they do something that's maybe not quite as close to what they used to do. And it's actually been really interesting. I used to, for a little bit there, I worked for, right whenever I left the Army, I worked for a little bit for the largest organic pasture-raised egg company in the world. And I did that for, for like 9 months. And one of the things that was really interesting to me was 90% of their supply base, 90% of their farmers were all Amish and Mennonite, right? And time again, I could see the company not understanding that culture and as a result having a lot of friction with their farmers. And so now it's kind of interesting as I get our egg company up and running. I have not called, well, maybe one person I think I reached out to, but for the most part, we have farmers just calling me who have said, hey, I heard from a farmer over in this area that you were starting up this egg company. I wanted to get into eggs, but I don't want to go with one of these big corporations. Would you be interested in us working with you? And everything so far, and particularly in the Amish and Mennonite community, everything is reputation. And so if one Amish guy tells another Amish guy, like, hey, you should work with this guy, he'll work with you, and vice versa. If they tell him, hey, I've had a bad experience with this corporation, well, then you'll lose access to that entire community, in a heartbeat. And everything is word of mouth. It's very informal, but, they trust each other kind of inherently. And so they would much rather trust the word of another local Amish or Mennonite guy than they would just some sales rep coming into town who says like, oh, hey, I've got this great looking contract for you. So yeah, it's been really interesting to see the contrast between, how that previous corporation that I worked for approached them, and then how we've kind of been able to do things a little bit differently. And an example of that is like whenever they were recruiting farmers, almost all of their like money and resources were allocated towards trying to recruit farmers through social media. And it's like 90% of your supply base is Amish and Mennonite. Yeah, and you're putting money into social media to try to recruit more farmers. That's not how you get Amish and Mennonite farmers.
Gosh, that is so like. Yeah. Instantly, I'm just like, fire that person.
Yeah. Classic, and that's what, classic, Green Beret problem set is like, we just look at a problem and we're like, wait a minute, to some guy who's, been in business for his whole life, who lives out in New York, has never lived or worked on a farm, like it makes plenty of sense to, hey, just post a bunch of ads on Facebook and try to get more farmers. That makes a lot of sense until you understand, the people that you're working with. And then, you would immediately see like, oh, hey, none of them have social media. So
no, absolutely not. But shout out to my buddy Elmer, a little person who left the Amish community.
Oh yeah,
season 5. Shout out to you, Elmer. We got to bring you back on the show. The work ethic, like, it's insane. Like they grow up knowing that, like, okay, like I'm gonna be a hard worker through and through, no matter what the things, like whatever you have to do to make sure that the family's good and everything in our community is solid, we are going to work.
Yes. Yeah.
So it makes perfect sense, like that there's a Green Beret that can find himself in this community and be like, hey, I can work with you guys because I too like to work really hard.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think we found a lot of similar values for sure. And like, for example, my wife and I, we don't have a television. We like to live simply, and so it was kind of like a natural, easy mesh for us to blend in with them. I don't shave my mustache yet, but maybe we'll get there. But
truly assimilate. Hey, that's the thing we did back in the day.
I know. Yeah.
A shout out to Jim Gant. He tried getting us to assimilate a little more in Afghanistan.
Yeah, that's right. He should. Yeah.
We could have been there. We could have owned it. We could have been really part of the communities. But anything to get brought in closer into the fold.
Yeah. And you brought up how hard they work. The other piece of that too is I think they only go up to an 8th grade education. They don't go past 8th grade, and it's kind of interesting to compare what is normal and expected in their communities where they have less of a quote unquote education. But then because of that, they self-teach themselves a lot. And what you see is they get involved in business a lot earlier. And so as soon as they finish 8th grade, especially if you're a boy, basically if you finish, as soon as you finish 8th grade, you go and work for, your dad's company or your brothers or your uncles or somebody. You go and work in business as just kind of a laborer. So you gain all the skills and understanding of that particular industry. And then, as soon as you turn 20, 21, 22, you're like ready to go out and start your own business. And so from a very young age, they're kind of inculcated with entrepreneurial values and the ability to do it. And they just kind of watch everybody around them is kind of just already starting their own small businesses and having generally success with it. And the other piece of that is their community supports their own small businesses, But if you just compare that to kind of like the normal education system in America, where it's like, hey, sit in this classroom until you're 18, and then for most people, it's like, well, the goal is to then go sit in a classroom for 4 more years and then just go work for somebody else at a big name corporation or whatever it might be. If you compare and contrast the two different cultures between like what's normal in America and what's normal in the Amish, it's like, well, I think we would almost all agree, like we'd actually rather see the end result that we see in the Amish than we would want to see the end result that we see in most of America, So
absolutely, Patrick, I got to tell you, the education system, even higher education, is absolute complete garbage.
Oh yeah.
It just like it blows my mind. Currently in college right now, and the amount of coursework that is not related to a degree that you have to take, that is just absolute complete garbage. Like, we're talking just things that you could just throw random words at a wall, and that's probably a college class. 1800s Dracula literature. That's the thing. Comparing the themes of Star Wars to modern day political friggin' parties, like all the stupid shit that makes no sense. Why are you going to the school to get a degree in gender studies? Makes no sense. What are you gonna do with that?
Yeah,
work at Starbucks.
I saw that a little bit at West Point too. You can imagine, like I think almost all West Pointers come out of West Point thinking to themselves like, wait a minute, am I ready to actually go into the army? I know nothing about the actual army. I know a lot about whatever my major was, but I don't know how the army functions, And so you like show up to a platoon as an infantry officer and you're like, dude, I don't know like what everyone does here. Like I don't know how all of this functions. You don't know anything about training calendars. You don't know anything about all of that. You basically understand how to do patrol operations with a platoon, and like that's the extent of your knowledge. And then everything you learned at West Point was just academic.
Wasted opportunity.
It really is. And because of all that, I actually almost left West Point after my sophomore year. I was teetering on leaving because I was just like, and this is kind of why I ended up leaving the military in some regards too. But I almost left after my sophomore year because I was just like, what am I doing here? Like I signed up to be in the military and serve my country. That was kind of my idea at the time. Definitely not doing that right now here, sitting here in college, and this is whenever ISIS started kind of kicking off a little bit too. But definitely wasn't doing that. And then, I've always kind of had this interest in the nonprofit space and that kind of thing. And I was just like, I'm really having no tangible value to the world, like sitting here in this class right now, learning, as a political science major, I was taking calculus too, but then I was going to go be an infantry officer. None of those things really, nothing I was doing was going to help me be a good infantry officer. Maybe political science, and understanding, especially as longer term when I became a Green Beret, understanding kind of broader political context or that kind of thing. But like calculus too certainly wasn't going to help me, and it certainly wasn't going to help me make an impact on the world in any way. So I really was teetering on leaving the academy at the end of my sophomore year.
What
just
got you to
because,
stay?
probably a lot of different things. I think part of it was, I had a mentor at the time who, definitely was influencing me to just kind of, stay committed to my
Yeah.
original mission and that kind of thing. And the other piece was, I had some probably insecurity of just like, how am I going to like survive? If I,
Yeah.
I didn't come,
Reality sets in a
yeah,
little
I
bit
didn't like
like,
come from money or anything. So it was like, well, if I don't have a guaranteed job as an infantry officer leaving the academy, I'm going to have, so there's probably a lot of uncertainty, I think, too, and
yeah.
insecurity about leaving, kind of going and doing my own thing. And so all that to be said, I think life works out the way it's supposed to work out. But that did definitely still, I kind of have always had that, even from a young age, had that kind of desire to make like a real tangible impact on the world. And I really did not see that, certainly while I was at the academy, even
Yeah.
to much of an extent, even while I was in the military. And part of that is probably, I came a lot later than maybe some of you guys did. But yeah, that, and that kind of drove why I got out of the military as well. And was for me, I just felt like I could have a much more visceral impact on the world, and a positive impact on the world outside of the military or outside
Yeah.
of, academia or whatever it may be.
It's true, man. The GWAT experience that we promoted through the filter of social media, TV shows, and it really drew a lot of people in.
Yeah.
And then when guys get in there, whether they go straight into the SF pipeline or go to conventional military units, they get there and they realize that there isn't this giant vacuum that's sucking everybody into Afghanistan and Iraq, and you're constantly in combat. It's like, wait, no, like some guys aren't going straight into combat. Some guys are going to do JRTC rotations and NTC rotations, and they may not get that combat role, that combat experience. And that's a hard pill to swallow.
Oh,
And that's why I think we fail to send the right message, and recruitment needs to really understand this. You need to start like amplifying the message of service, what it means to serve, what it means to be in the military, in the Marine Corps, in the Army, and Air Force. Like champion the idea that service is a wonderful and amazing thing to do, and you're going to be part of an amazing team, and you're going to get to do great things. And maybe you're not going to get the Afghan experience, but you will get an experience. You will get something you can be proud of.
Yeah.
But I started seeing that in the teams myself. Guys were like, yeah, I'm ready for Afghanistan. It's like, all right, young buck, you may not get that. That may not be your thing. Be excited about your JSET, your CVIT missions, like your actual like core competencies, what you do as a Green Beret. And that goes to everybody. I think that was a hard thing for a lot of people that are very excited. It's like, hey, you're still going to do great fucking things.
Oh, yeah.
You still got to be excited.
Yeah. And I was fortunate. I went to 5th Group, so of course, I still got my Iraq rotation and did Tajikistan and a couple other places. But I think that, this is just my personal opinion about sort of the regiment as a whole. Is I think we're missing a lot of opportunities trying to get involved or stay involved in places like Iraq and Syria, where we could be doing things on maybe the more low vis side. In foreign countries. I just think that our expertise could be leveraged in a lot better way by the U.S. government, particularly at a smaller scale and a lot of sort of fringe countries. And that would probably provide a lot more value to guys than like even an Iraq rotation, because it's like you go over to Iraq right now and it's like, what are we here? Iraq and Syria both is like, what are we doing here? We've been here for 20 years. We're not winning. We're not. Everybody can do their own research about, why we got into Iraq and Afghanistan and, how we ended up doing a 20-year war that should have been, maybe a 1-year operation, special operations mission. But, and so, but you go over there and you're just like, what are we doing? There's we're doing something, but we're not doing anything that really provides real value to, definitely not to the place to any of those places, but even to the United States government, it's like there's such a capacity for Green Berets. And, I'm sure just like you, I've met so many Green Berets. I'm just like, wow, this dude is he is wicked smart, super charismatic, great guy. I would love he'd be fantastic. Anywhere you put him in the world, he'd be fantastic and he would crush it. And, we're having him sit on a fob in Syria right now, just getting rocketed by some Iranian militias, and it's like, well, is that really the best use of that skill set, is to have him just sit there and eat rockets, I don't know. I feel like we could leverage, both from finding purpose within service perspective and also just value to the United States government. Is like we could find a much better way to leverage the entire regiment. But yeah, that's just my 2 cents.
It's
I don't make the
absolutely
decisions
true.
though.
It's true. It's funny when you wake up, so to speak, and you realize, Jesus, what the fuck are we doing? Like
Yeah.
we're the adults in the room now. It's like it's one thing to be a young guy in the rank and file, but when you're in leadership and you're like, all right, this is kind of fucked up.
Yeah. And you're like trying to convince the guys, like, no, this matters, guys. I promise, it matters.
Wink.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw some buzzwords in to make you think it matters. Yeah, that's
Just read the con up.
yeah,
It's the
that's
truth.
right.
Man. And so, a lot of us, if you're on the outside, you tend to think that every soft guy ends up doing like 20 plus years, and that's just not the truth. A lot of times we do have those hard moments where we have to look at our life, look at what we value, look at the things we want to really do. And in your experience, when you came up to that point, like, how did you go about transition?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, one of my sort of big points for guys who are getting out, I think, is you need to decide what matters to you and then create your entire life around whatever that is, rather than getting out and kind of falling into what everyone else is doing and then trying to just like do what matters to you on the weekends or in the evenings, and a big piece of that is like family, is a great example. Is like, well, if you really, really value time with family and you want to focus on, a lot of us were gone so much for a lot of our kids' lives and that kind of thing. And, and so let's say you want to spend time with your kids now. It's like, well, don't want to spend, don't claim that you want to spend time with your kids and then get a job where, you're a contractor again, and then you're gone 6 months out of the year again, back for a few months, gone six, you know what I'm saying? So, and obviously so we all have to pay bills, but, I think there's an element of like owning control of your own life and your own destiny and saying like, okay, what truly matters to me, and then creating your entire life around that system. And so, I've been pretty fortunate to do that. On my way out of the Army, we started a real estate investment company. And so we own some rentals, and then we do flip and sells and that kind of thing. It was taking us a little bit longer to get that to a point where that would pay all of our bills than I expected. And so whenever I left the military, I was running that business, and then I got a job for this egg company, this pasture raised egg company that I worked for a little bit. And but even still, like that job allowed me to work remotely, allowed me to work from home, so I could kind of run my business here at home, work for that company, still kind of have our little homestead, and spend a lot more time with our kids, which was really important to me. And then simultaneously all of that, we were starting a nonprofit here in town. And so that really, one of my big things was I wanted to be able to stay local. I wanted to be able to I have a lot of different interests, like I think a lot of us do. And so I wanted to be able to kind of manage all of those interests from one place, kind of like, my own little headquarters here at the house. And so, that my sort of transition focused on allowing me to stay home and manage everything that I was interested in, work with business partners that I have in real estate, I've got a partner that helps with a nonprofit, and I kind of manage it all from here and do everything from home. And and that kind of was my leap into, I guess, the entrepreneurial world, was starting that real estate company. And kind of, that was my first experience, like starting a real, like, kind of larger scale business. We've got about a half a dozen of us on the team between my business partners and the guys on the crew. And so that's like a very real and growing business. And that was my first experience with that. And then, like I said, simultaneous to that, we were starting a nonprofit here in town. And, I can go into the story of how we started it, but
absolutely, man.
Sure.
Nonprofit work is something that I've realized is perfectly suited for so many of our guys, not just our soft guys, but our infantry brothers, paratroopers, all of our service members.
For sure.
You enlisted to be of service to your nation. And as you go through your career and you get rank and you learn how to run a platoon, learn how to be a first sergeant, you are getting vital fucking hands-on knowledge of how to run daily operations.
For sure.
Like, and guys are getting out and they're completely forgetting about all the things they did. I just talked to a friend of mine who sadly is a command sergeant major. Fucking John Waterhouse, love this dude. But I can even hear it in his voice when he's like, like he's doing the right thing. When he gets out of his time's done, he's going to be taking a knee. But all of us get this idea that, I didn't really do anything important. Maybe I'll just go teach or go do something small. Like, don't do something small in your second chapter.
Yeah.
think of how you can be of service to your greater community doing something great. And that's nonprofit work right there, man.
Mm-hmm.
They are looking for individuals like yourselves that can get in there and help them get to their target audience, help their organization run effectively and smooth. And I find so many out there are reputable and they're great. And like, dude, do your research. Look at all of them that are out there and see how you can get there. If not for pay, maybe just volunteer some time. If you did your full 20 and you just want to help out an organization, that's a great place to look for seams and gaps, as we say, where people need work.
Yep, for sure. And it breaks my heart a little bit on the officer side because I see officers get out and, like the classic post Green Beret officer route is like, okay, I get out, I go to a top, 10 MBA program.
Yes.
I move, I go to, Harvard or Wharton or wherever it is,
Yeah.
go get my MBA, and then I go get a job for like McKinsey or Deloitte or one of these big, big consulting companies. And it's like, I mean, if you're just super passionate about like defense consulting or something like that, then sure, go that route. But if you're only doing it because that's what everyone else is doing whenever you get out, then it's like, bro, you're going to hate your life, and I've seen that from guys who, were passionate about service and they wanted to give back to the community. They wanted to be involved. They want all the things that we sort of value from military service in the outside. But then that's what they do. They go get their MBA and go work for one of these big corporations. It's like, you're not going to find it there, and there are, just like you said, there are really, really great nonprofits out there who are doing really great work who, you're not going to make a $300K salary with a $50K signing bonus, whenever you go work for those guys. But at least you'll wake up and you'll be like, well, I don't hate my life and I enjoy what I do, whenever I show up to work. So it breaks my heart a little bit to see guys like transitioning into just, MBA straight into.
But you're right. It's the young officer that breaks my heart because it's like, you have so much potential, sir. You can go do shit. Like, you can literally write your own ticket to do amazing shit.
Yeah.
And then before long, you see them, and it's like their LinkedIn profile turns grayer and dimmer with the more success they get in that field. It's just like you see the life just drain out their face.
Yeah, it's like they rejected being a major in 2004 just to go be the equivalent in McKinsey or whatever. Yeah, I see that all the time.
Man, so fucking true. And to go back to your nonprofit, when did you get that idea? How did that come about?
Yeah, to be honest, most people probably won't even believe me when I tell this story. And it's going to be a little interesting because I'm not religious, but I'm kind of spiritual, like believe in basically faith in God and that sort of thing, but not like one particular religion. And one day I was just like out working on the farm and it was just miserable, dude. I was just like, everything was going wrong. Cows were getting out, fence was breaking. I was just having like the most miserable day out on my farm. And it was even kind of a weird series of circumstances that brought us to Kentucky because we'd planned on living in Tennessee and then we ended up here. And I was just like, I just like sat down. I was like, God, why on earth did you bring me to Hopkinsville, Kentucky? Like, I had no plans to ever live in Kentucky. Like this was not my life plan whatsoever. But it was like very clear that this is where we were supposed to end up at the time. So I was just like, why on earth did you bring us here? And I just felt like a calling that was like, hey, go talk to this I had driven by like a week or two prior. I had driven by this little nonprofit in town here in Hopkinsville. And I just felt this like saying like, go talk to that nonprofit. And I was like, okay, when I show up, what am I supposed to like just tell them? And it was just like, ask them what the 3 biggest needs in the community are right now. And I was like, okie dokie. So I literally, in that moment, hopped in my truck, drove down to the this like tiny little rinky-dink nonprofit in town, knocked on the door and was like, hey, I don't know if you guys believe in God or not, but I feel like he told me to come down here and ask you guys a few questions. And the girl who like, was there was like, okay, sure. Like, here's our director, And
this man's high on PC.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And fortunately, that dude didn't just kick me out. And he took like a couple hours and sat down and kind of told me about the history of the city here and what all was going on and pointed out like a lot of interesting kind of figures, but one of which is like here in this county, the county is so poor that the federal government came in and mandated free school lunch for the entire county. Whoa. No matter what. So every kid gets free lunch no matter what when they go to school because the county is so poor. The median income, I think, is somewhere around like 18 or 20,000 in this county. Like it is insanely impoverished here in Christian County. And so that has led to a lot of problems, particularly with drug addiction. And so I asked him, I said, what are the 3 biggest needs in the community? That's what I was kind of there to ask. And number one, he said, was there were so many people, particularly men, coming out of drug addiction, going into rehab, and then having nowhere to go, no support structure, that they were basically just going right back into drug addiction. And so number one was providing housing for guys coming out of drug addiction and kind of like a safe space to live. Number two was here in town, there's a lot of kind of like small churches that do just like once a week, one place will have some food for people, another day on the week, another place will have some food for people, but there's not like any sort of like centralized location where people can just like go and they know that if they have a need, they can find some food. That doesn't really exist here. And then number three, he said, was education. The education here is just abysmal. Kentucky is rated fairly poorly across the nation in terms of education, and Christian County is rated poorly within Kentucky. So just across the board, those were the kind of the 3 big things that he brought up. And so I was already working in real estate, and I was like, well, finding housing, I can find housing and I can put a program together fairly easily. And so I think I met with him in July 2 years ago. And by August, we had closed on a property to start a little sober living house. And so
that's the Green Beret approach right there, man.
Yeah, again, that's awesome. What I do. I just, dive head into everything. And that's what I did. Again, knew nothing about, other than I grew up around quite a bit of drug addiction and had some friends who have passed away from drug addiction and that kind of thing. But in terms of, solving the problem of drug addiction, had absolutely no knowledge of, had zero knowledge of. And so I just started trying to consume as much information as I could and make as many relationships in the community as I could. And, fortunately got plugged in with a guy who was kind of already doing a little bit of this. And so he kind of helps me manage the house day to day a little bit. And we had a lot of issues early on, as you can kind of expect. And my approach is probably a little bit different. It definitely is a lot different than some of the other programs out there. So guys will come from a rehab and then they'll live in our house. And usually whenever you have a house like that, it's incredibly locked down. It's like guys, they have to be in by a certain time. They have to make their bed. If they don't make their bed, they get fined. If they don't do their dishes, they get fined. If they don't do X, Y, or Z, like they have to pay money to the house and that kind of thing. And there's just some approaches to that I don't love. My kind of personal belief is like, if you give responsibility to someone, they'll either take it or leave it. And so you can find out within about a week or two whether a guy is serious about his own recovery by just saying like, look, here's enough rope to hang yourself with. You're free to go use drugs again if you want to. Like I'm not gonna hold your hand and be your babysitter and not let you do drugs. But if you're serious about, recovery, then I will provide a place where you can genuinely recover. And so we took that approach. And because of that, what we do is we use some of the profits from our real estate to basically pay the mortgage on that place. And so the guys who live in our sober living house can live there completely rent free. And so what that does is that gives them the ability to save up money. They're not putting money towards rent every month. And so they can save up money, put their, actually get life under control a little bit for the first time in their lives. And then hopefully that they have enough saved up for first month's rent, security deposit, maybe down payment on a car, all the things that they need to actually go start their life. Because most of them are starting at zero. They've hit rock bottom. They have $0 in their bank account. And then they're coming out of a rehab. And a lot of these sober living houses will charge them, like $500, $600 a month in rent or more to live there. And I was just like, well, at that rate, they're not going to be able to save any money, because they're getting jobs where they're getting paid maybe a couple grand a month. They're not making a killing. And so it's kind of a system. I just saw a lot in addiction where the system was designed to keep making money from these guys as they both while they were in addiction and then even after they were in addiction. And so I kind of wanted to just put our own take on it. And and even just last week we had a guy who was only in the house for I think 8 months, and in 8 months he had saved up like 10 grand or something like that. And then he actually moved to an apartment right across the street because he's like, I want my own space. But he's like, you guys are the only family that I really have right now. And so I want to be close and still hang out. But I wanted my own space and I want to kind of like move on with life. And so it's just like a perfect example of if you take advantage of what we offer is like in a very short amount of time, you can change your life, And so that's kind of what we're doing with the nonprofit at the moment.
Yeah. And you're so humble about it, but like that example right there, man, like you're saving lives and you're breathing life back to a community that's on the brink of death. literally.
Yeah.
And to have those wins, man, that's greater than any combat win. It
Yeah.
really is. Like that's the shit that we need to promote. Like
And it was
this is how we help build our country back.
Yeah, yeah. It was kind of funny, in my like outgoing counseling with the BC, whenever I like told them, hey, I'm not gonna stay in for 20, I'm gonna get out, and they all try to convince you to stay in for 20. One of the things he asked me why, and I was like, well, I just feel like, I would have more autonomy to provide real value to the world whenever I get out than I can within the confines of like the military structure right now. And he was like, yeah, he's like, I get what you're saying. He's like, but when I was a major, I was writing policy for SOC that was impacting, the entire continent. It's like I was impacting an entire continent. Like that's a lot of people or whatever. And I was like, no. I was like, I'm talking about I'm talking about like real visceral change in like a human life. I'm not talking about just like something like maybe that technically affects more people, but I'm talking about like something like truly substantial. And yeah, I listen to, a lot of like Jordan Peterson and that kind of thing. And one of the big things that he talks about is like, you're one of your many roles as a man is like to orient yourself in a proper direction, and then orient your family in a proper direction, and then orient your community in a proper direction, And in America, I think we see a lot of the opposite, where everybody thinks they like to comment and commentate on sort of like national policy or national problems or international issues. And everybody wants to comment on that. And we all fail to address the problems within ourselves, And it's like, man, if we all dedicated all the time that we spend complaining about, Donald Trump or Joe Biden, if we took all of that time and instead just focused it on our own little local communities where we live and where our feet are, it's like the world would look drastically different than it does right now, And so many problems would be solved by particularly, Green Berets or post-military guys, because we do have that desire to like help people, and we just don't necessarily know where to do it. But yeah, I think it's an opportunity for sure.
Absolutely, man. One tribe at a time approach, one problem set for one specific group that we're working with, bringing it back to Jim Gant.
Yeah.
Dude, it's so true. Being able to sit there and have a real world, you can wake up every day and look at the impact you're making. And I hope more of our brothers and sisters hear stories like this and realize that they can have a huge impact in their local communities when they get out. Patrick, if we want to support you or follow along your journey, where should people go?
I mean, you can follow me on Instagram, I guess, just official Patrick Samuels. Or if you want to follow the nonprofit or help out with the nonprofit, humbleharvest.org. And then our egg company is Sunnyside Egg Co. You can follow all those on social media and kind of track progress and that sort of thing. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at right now.
Heck yeah, man. If you guys pause right now, go to the episode description, either on YouTube if you're watching it, or if you're listening to it on Spotify and Apple. Before you check out that description, go on to give us a review, leave a positive comment, give us some stars, and then go to the episode description and follow Patrick and send him some love on social media and support him and his nonprofit. Patrick, thank you for what you're doing, brother. I cannot tell you enough that you are doing amazing things, and I can't wait to have you back on the show. It is absolutely a pleasure to have you today. And to everybody listening, thank you for being here. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you all next time. Till then, take care.
Thanks, brother.